Clive Staples Lewis was born in Belfast, Ireland on November 29, 1898. He lived in a small house on the outskirts of town where he and his brother, Warren Lewis, created imaginary fairy tales, which they began to write down at a very young age. Known as Jack to his friends, Lewis was fascinated with anthropomorphic animals. He fell in love with Beatrix Potter's stories and often wrote and illustrated his own animal stories. He and his brother created the world of Boxen, inhabited and run by animals. When Lewis was 10 years old, his mother died of cancer. He would renounce his Christian faith 3 years later and become interested in mythology and the occult. He immersed himself in Norse and Greek mythology and later Irish mythology and literature. He received a scholarship to Oxford University in 1916, but decided to enter the military in 1917. He was only there for a short period of time, however, as he was injured by shrapnel from a stray mortar shell in the Battle of Arras in April 1918. After the war, Lewis returned to Oxford and graduated in 1925 with degrees in literature and philosophy. He was then elected a Fellow of Magdalen College, Oxford, where he worked for nearly 30 years, from 1925 to 1954. Lewis converted to theism in 1929 and eventually returned to Christianity in 1931. In 1954, he was awarded the newly founded chair of medieval and Renaissance literature at Cambridge University and was elected a Fellow of Magdalen College. During this time, Lewis and his circle of literary friends became an informal discussion society known as the Inklings. Some of his friends included J.R.R. Tolkien, Neville Coghill, Lord David Cecil, Charles Williams, Owen Barfield, and his brother Warren Lewis. In 1956, Lewis married American writer Joy Davidman, and she died of cancer 4 years later at the age of 45. Lewis died on November 22, 1963 from renal failure, 1 week before his 65th birthday. While Lewis was a well-known literary scholar, he was best known as a prolific writer. Throughout his lifetime, he wrote more than 30 books, many of which deal implicitly with Christian themes such as sin, humanity's fall from grace, and redemption. His works have been translated into more than 30 languages and have sold millions of copies. He is best known for his works of fiction, especially the Screwtape Letters, the Chronicles of Narnia, and the Space Trilogy. He was also well known for his non-fiction Christian apologetics, such as Mere Christianity, Miracles, and The Problem of Pain. The books that make up the Chronicles of Narnia have sold the most and have been popularized on stage, TV, radio, and cinema. His philosophical writings are widely cited by Christian apologists from many denominations.
Lewis's works are influenced primarily by the joy he found in Christianity shortly after returning from the war. He mentioned at the time of his conversion in his book Surprised by Joy that Christianity seemed to him as a child not to address reality. In other words, he thought it was shallow. Later, however, his view on joy drastically changed, and though he still saw reality as objective, he came to the conclusion that absolute truth did exist, and that it existed in his newfound object of joy, which was the God in Christianity and Jesus Christ. Throughout his career, he addressed different topics with logic and objective reason as a modernist author. He also wrote narratives such as The Great Divorce, Screwtape Letters, and the Chronicles of Narnia to represent, expand, and explain allegorically the meaning of Christianity. In the Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan represents Jesus Christ while the White Witch represents Satan. In this series, he depicts the story of the Bible, specifically the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, in a fairy tale story that even small children could understand. Lewis's Mere Christianity would be a well-written and diversely different perspective for incoming English majors because it deals with the philosophy of morality from a Christian perspective. Lewis was one of the last modern-era writers, and he is a good representation of the literature at that time where truth was still objective and beliefs were made through logical insights. It contrasts the postmodern thought of relative truth and more abstract reasoning. Overall, Mere Christianity is a good book historically and causes readers to question and wrestle with reality in a unique way. And one of his most challenging statements was when he questioned his own morality in his book. My argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust, but how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? What Lewis believes is the very center of his literature, and that is joy, an unsatisfied desire which is itself more desirable than any other satisfaction. Joy being so great but never fully satisfying proved to Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien that we are made for another world, which he writes in A Mind Awake. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Although Lewis is known as the most influential Christian apologist of his day, some theologians disagree with his theological views and his emphasis, or lack thereof, of biblical doctrine. Lewis was known for going outside the bounds of Christianity with books that used logic to describe heaven and a spiritual world that isn't described in the Bible. Still, many hold respect for C.S. Lewis and his logic behind truth and joy, including John Piper, who said, "Lewis has a capacity to see and feel the freshness and wonder of things that are childlike, and his capacity to describe it, understand it, and defend it was massively manly." Lewis's style of writing is inviting to readers of all ages and backgrounds. With narratives, philosophical works, and autobiographies, Lewis has a lot to bring to the table of an English classroom. His style uniquely integrates challenging concepts in a persuasive, imaginative, and often amusing way. Influenced by his rich life, which included witnessing 2 world wars, and his Oxford education, his works are impressively unique and thought-provoking to readers at any level. In C.S. Lewis's works alone, there seems to be a book for everyone.